And then all of a sudden he starts to look around, he gets a little bit nervous, and boom, 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 one at a time, all his bodyguards are going down. And then we see Hanks walking, it's raining out, great scene. He's walking towards Paul Newman, looks at him, Newman knows it's over, got the machine gun, boom, 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 boom. He kills Rudy right then and there, wiped everybody out, revenge complete. Hey everybody, welcome to another Sit Down with Michael Franzese. It is Mob Movie Monday, definitely a favorite of all my followers, and I hope you all had a great weekend. And today, we're going to do a movie called Road to Perdition. I want to tell you a little story about that before we get into it. Before we do that though, we reached our mark, 500,000 subscribers. Big giveaway coming up, first prize, a lot of prizes, but first prize, grand prize, we are going to have somebody travel out to sit with me at Slices, have the greatest piece of pizza you ever had in a long time, maybe in your whole life, who knows, and have a sit down with me. And then we're going to go over to my studio and you're going to watch us film one of our videos. I think you're going to enjoy it. Spend some time with me. We'll keep you overnight if we have to. I promise you, you'll be in good hands. So again, why do we do these giveaways? Because we are very appreciative that you tune into our videos and watch our content. You have a lot of choices on YouTube. We know that. And the fact that you're tuning into ours, we really appreciate it. So thank you very much. Great grand prize. Who knows what we're going to do at a 750,000 or a million if we're blessed enough to reach those numbers. But this is a big one. MichaelFranzese.com, the community, the crew, the inner circle, really growing. I really encourage you to join. People are just, they're just loving it. We're putting a lot of content in there. There is some personal involvement with me on the right level. Got to get in there. And a lot of good stuff happening there. And I am always so pleased with how people are encouraging one another. Valuable stuff. We need it, especially coming out of this pandemic, and getting back to normal. Looks like we're getting there. So join those two things. I got to reference this because I'm getting hundreds of comments. Are you sitting down with Sammy the Bull Gravano? Stay tuned, okay? And I promise you, if something happens, it's going to be epic. That's all I can tell you. And I'm saying if. It's going to be epic. Trust me. Something you're not going to want to miss. So let's move on to Mob Movie Monday, The Road to Perdition. That movie came out in 2002. And every time, I've heard about it a million times. I'm sure many of you have. It's got a great cast. But every time I sat down to watch it, I said, Tom Hanks is playing a gangster? Let me ask you this. After watching Forrest Gump, which came out in the late 90s, could you have seen Tom Hanks as a gangster? I just couldn't, So for some reason, I just never sat down and watched the movie. Big mistake. Great movie, great cast. I watched it last night. I really enjoyed it, and that's why I decided to review it. Plus, a lot of you have been asking about that, so we're going to do it today. So we'll get right into it. But I got to say this. There's some really classic lines that were said in this movie by Paul Newman, especially. He plays the mob boss, the Irish mob boss, back in the 1930s. That's where it takes place. But I really like some of the things that were said, some of the dialogue. Very well written. The title is very interesting, Road to Perdition. How many of you, just without looking it up, really understand what the word perdition means? Let me explain it to you. Let me give you the definition. In Christian theology, a state of eternal punishment and damnation into which a sinful and unpenitent person passes after death. Road to perdition. A sinful and unpenitent person passes after death. That's not a great title. That doesn't sound good to me. That's someplace that I certainly don't want to go. But very, very interesting. And I really thought of the title for the first time last night. And you know what? The movie fits the title. Really was great. So this is about Irish gangsters during Prohibition in the middle of the country, near Chicago, Illinois area around there. 1931, I think it takes place. Tom Hanks stars in it. Paul Newman. Stanley Tucci is terrific. He plays Frank Nitti. Jude Law plays a hitman. I mean, can you see Jude Law as a hitman? I think I could after some of the things that he saw, but he was great. Everybody was terrific. They're all brilliant actors, of course. The movie opens up pretty much where it's seen through the eyes of a young boy, Tom Hanks' son, And Tom Hanks' name is Michael Sullivan. That's his character in the movie. He's a hitman, a gangster that works for Paul Newman. Paul Newman took care of him for most of his life, his adult life. He's worked for him. He's a collector. He's a hitman. He does all this stuff for Paul Newman, who's a very powerful guy in his own right. The story is about Michael, Tom Hanks, and his son Michael, and what they go through over a 6 or 7 week period of time. And it's very, very dramatic. So it's really seen through the eyes of the young boy. And so it starts out, they're at a funeral, I should say a wake, an Irish wake. Now, I don't know if you know anything about Irish wakes, but I've heard many, many stories about it. But a lot of times I've heard this, back in the day, back in the neighborhood, that when somebody died in an Irish, a strictly really Irish family, they would basically put the corpse at the table. Now, don't get offended, anybody that's Irish. This is only what I was told, so it might have been a little bit dramatized. But they actually put the corpse on the table, and they all drink and celebrate the passing of whoever it is that died. All right, that's what I've heard. I've never witnessed it, but friends of mine told me that they make a celebration out of a wake, a funeral, when somebody passes on. Well, they didn't exactly do that here. It opens up at a wake. It was somebody that worked for the mob boss. He was obviously a mobster. He worked for Paul Newman. They say a few words about it, and then they celebrate. They're dancing, they're drinking, they're partying, they're having a real good time. But it seems that the brother of the person that died, Danny, was upset about something. We don't know what that is early on. And by the way, I forgot to mention somebody, Daniel Craig. You know Daniel Craig, James Bond. He plays Paul Newman's son, guy by the name of Connor. He's the black sheep. This kid is nothing but a problem. And he causes problems early on in the story. So Danny's brother was saying something about his brother's death, and he gets a little bit out of hand. You see, he gets a little bit contentious. He's about to make some accusations, I think, about Paul Newman, the mob boss, and he's whisked off right away. Tom Hanks goes and grabs him. They bring him outside. Connor grabs him. They bring him outside, and they put him in a car, and they get him out of there because before he makes a mistake. The mob boss tells Connor, go and see him and talk to him. And he says, and just talk to him, meaning don't do anything else. So we get to another scene where the brother is in a warehouse talking to Connor. And the brother makes some kind of accusation. Maybe it was against Connor. It seems like it was against Connor, where the brother Danny allegedly was stealing money during the days of Prohibition. And his brother was sitting in the chair saying, my brother never stole. He was honest. That didn't happen. And he kind of makes a reference that maybe Connor, mob boss's son, Daniel Craig, knows what he's talking about. Well, in the meantime, Tom Hanks has come also. He's got a gun with him. And his son, Michael, had snuck away. He was in the back of the car. Now, Tom Hanks didn't know this, but his son was in the back of the car, and he goes in and he witnesses what's going on through a hole in the wall, whatever he's watching, right? As this thing gets a little contentious, Connor, Daniel Craig, shoots the brother in the head. And there was 2 other guys in there. Anyway, a shooting occurs. Michael is watching this through the hole, the kid, and he's like, wow, never seen anything like this before. He makes a little bit noise. Connor and Tom Hanks hear him. He runs away, tries to jump over a fence. He can't get over. He sits down. Tom Hanks sees him, walks over to him, and starts to talk to him and realizes this is a problem. Connor comes over. He sees the boy there too. No good. And he says to Tom Hanks, basically, can he keep quiet? Is this okay? He just witnessed a murder, basically. And Tom Hanks says he'll be okay. Obviously, he's worried about his son. The next scene we really see, Tom Hanks is telling Michael, you got to forget what you saw. Just let it go. Certain things happen in life. Let it go. And then we see another scene where Tom Hanks is sitting with Paul Newman. Now remember, Paul Newman loves Tom Hanks, and Tom Hanks is very grateful to Paul Newman, the mob boss, for taking care of him, giving him the job that he's had for all of these years, and he's very, very loyal. So they have a discussion, and Newman knows now that his youngest son saw what happened. He says, is he going to be all right? And Tom Hanks says he's going to be all right. And then Newman says something to Tom Hanks that just struck a chord with me. And he says, sons were put on this earth to trouble their fathers. All you dads out there, did you hear that? Sons are put on this earth to trouble their fathers. And I stopped for a moment. Now, I got 2 sons. And I said, man, does this relate to me in any way? And I think in some ways it certainly does. My younger son, Michael Jr., I got to tell you, he's 32 years old now, and he's okay now. You know, he runs slices for me, and he's doing a great job. But I got to tell you, for 12 years of my life with this kid, he was a handful. And, you know, I don't want to get into it. Maybe we can do another video just about kids and, you know, share some of our feelings about them, some of our experiences. But I can tell you this. This kid drove me crazy. Now, I communicate for a living. I could not communicate with him. It was the most frustrating thing, I think, in my life. I could not communicate with him. He would just turn me off, wouldn't listen to anything I tried to tell him. And obviously, I'm his dad. I want to help him out. I want to prepare him for his future. I want to give him knowledge. I want to tell him the right thing. He just turned me off, would not listen to me. We had a lot of battles back and forth growing up. It's okay now, you know, because my wife, she prayed for him. She used to tell me he's a late bloomer. And I used to say, how late? The kid doesn't listen to anything. Anyway, she was right. He turned out okay. But boy, that line really struck me. Sons will put on this earth to trouble their fathers. Dads, think about that. And if you got a story to share, you know, share it with me. As a matter of fact, if you're in my crew, my inner circle, share a story with me. I love to hear stuff like that. You know, join up. You know, this is the kind of stuff that we do. We share information. It's valuable for all of us. Then we see another scene. Paul Newman, you know, the mob boss, is sitting with all of his guys. And Connor is at one end of the table, Paul Newman's at the other, and he's telling how he's going to divide up basically Danny's business now that Danny's gone. Paul Newman tells Connor, who you could see is a real problem child, do you want to say anything to everybody? And Connor, like, kind of jokingly apologizes for what happened last night, basically the murder. Paul Newman looks at him and says, do you think that's funny, what happened last night? You can see he's upset. Connor gets a little bit nervous, so he tries to say it a little better, but he still has that smirk on his face. And he says, well, I'd like to apologize. And Paul Newman slams his hand on the table and sees he's very, very upset with the way Connor acted in front of all of these other men. It was very inappropriate, and says, a proper apology, please. It was really a dynamic scene, and Paul Newman's a great actor. I think one of the last movies that he did, but he's a great actor. Again, very hard for me to see Daniel Craig. I see him as James Bond, but he really played a good role in this movie. Now it happens, very, very interesting. Connor basically sets up Paul Newman. For some reason, he's jealous of him. He doesn't like the fact that his son saw that murder. Troubling to him. Paul Newman gives Tom Hanks an assignment. Go out and collect money from this guy, who's an Italian guy, that wasn't paying. He lent the money, it was a Shylock deal, wasn't paying. He was behind in his payments. So Tom Hanks gets in his car and he's about to go away, and Connor comes up and said, did my father give you this note to give to the debtor? Hanks says no. So he hands him a note, sealed in an envelope, doesn't open it, and he goes to see the guy. Goes into a nightclub that he's in, and he gets in the guy's office, and the guy's sitting at his desk. He's got his bodyguard behind him. And Tom Hanks says, I'm here to collect money, you owe it. But before I do that, here's a note that was sent by Paul Newman, the boss. He opens the note. Now remember, Tom Hanks doesn't know what's in it. So he opens the note, and you can see he's reading it, and he gets a little bit nervous. And all of a sudden, the desk starts shaking. Tom Hanks sees there's a problem. The guy behind the desk is about to shoot him. Tom Hanks shoots him and the bodyguard. Boom, out. He walks over to the desk. He kills them both, and he looks at the note. And the note says, if you want to get out from under the debt, kill Sullivan. Now, that was a setup. That wasn't sent from the mob boss. That wasn't sent from Paul Newman. Connor made it up. So now, he knows he's got a real problem. Tom Hanks does. But Connor doesn't stop at this. We see him go to Tom Hanks' home at night. He actually goes into the house and he kills Tom Hanks' wife and his youngest son. Not Michael. He has a son younger than him. He kills them both. And we see that it's Connor. A lot of intense scenes in this movie. We see another very intense scene. Obviously, Tom Hanks comes home. Michael sees that his mom and brother are dead. And obviously, he has a breakdown. That's young Michael. Tom Hanks, senior Michael, comes back. He goes upstairs. He sees what's happening. We hear him crying, and it's a horrible scene. I mean, his wife and youngest son killed. He knows now he's got a problem, obviously. So now we see the next scene where Paul Newman is with Connor. He finds out what's happened, and he is upset. He starts banging on his son, cursing him out. He said, you know, I was cursed the day you were born. Imagine a father saying that to your son. I'm cursed the day you were born. You were cursed from the day you were born. And you can see how angry and upset he is. But then what does he do? He embraces him. It's still his son. Blood is thicker than water. These scenes, I don't know about you, but they kind of got to me, you know, having children like that and thinking some of these things. Now, fortunately, none of my children ever did something so drastic. You know, I've been very blessed in that regard. None of them have done anything that, you know, would even come close to anything like that. But, you know, sometimes just the little things that they do, you look at them and you say, why? You know, why? You know, we love you and we're trying to teach you and we want you to do the right thing. And we see you hurting yourself and it hurts. It really does hurt. You don't want to see your kids get in trouble. You don't want to see them go down the wrong path or do the wrong thing. So a lot of these thoughts came into my mind as I was watching this movie. And, you know, basically because of my boys. The girls have been pretty good. They haven't given me much trouble at all. You know, I got 5 of them and they've been great, but the boys, a little bit tougher. So now as we move forward, Tom Hanks kills one of Paul Newman's guys. Kills him. He knows he's in trouble. He knows he's going to get it. So what does he do? He's got to get out of town really quickly. He wants to make sure that Michael is safe because he knows, you know, in the mob life, things get ruthless. He goes on the road, and what he's going to do with his son, Michael, and he tells him, we can never come back to this house anymore. It's over. So now his whole thought is, how do I protect my son? And in the same way, I want revenge. Remember, he's a hitman. Tom Hanks is he's not Forrest Gump in this movie. He's a hitman. So his thoughts, I got to protect my son and I got to get revenge for what happened. And when he kills one of Rooney's guys, it's kind of a message to him like, I'm coming for you. This ain't over. You know, I'm coming back. So he gets in the car and what is he going to do? He goes to Chicago and he's going to meet with Frank Nitti, Stanley Tucci, and he's going to sit down with him. He has to sit down with him in his office, and he says, look, I want to come and work for you, but here's the deal. I got to get revenge on what happened to me with Rooney and his guys and Connor. They killed my family. I got to get revenge. I want to work for you. I don't want you to help me in any way. I just don't want you to tell on me. Just let me do my thing. Let me get what I got to get done in my life. And Frank Nitti, Tucci, says, I can't do that. We protected you. And you do something like that, we can't protect you anymore. He says, I can't do that. So he turns him down. Now, Tom Hanks knows he's got a real problem. He leaves. What we don't know, what we see afterwards, is that Paul Newman is sitting in the next office with his son Connor. He knows what was going on. Now, he could have taken Tom Hanks out right then and there, but he chose not to. He still loves this guy. You know, it's his son that caused this whole problem. What do our kids do to us sometimes? They drive us crazy. Connor says we should have taken him out now and we got to kill his son too. Paul Newman is very bothered by this, but he realizes that's the only thing that can happen here. He's got to kill Hanks and he's got to kill the kid. But he does have a heart and he says, kill Hanks, but not the kid. And he tells Tucci to handle it. And Tucci said, I got a hitman that can do the job and he's great. Rooney and Tucci put the contract out on Tom Hanks' life. Now, in this case, I got to say something very interesting. They're going to hire a hitman, and they're going to pay this guy. He's outside of the organization. He's an independent guy. They're going to pay him. But I'm going to tell you this. In a real mob life, they wouldn't be paying people. Not at all. You got enough guys around that can handle stuff like that, and that's their job. You don't pay people. That contract is not a real piece of paper. It's just a term that's used, and there's no payment made on that. Okay, in my 20 plus years in a life, I've never seen anybody get paid for it. Maybe you should ask the Sammy the same question. We don't do it. There's enough guys around that are capable, and that's their job. When they take the oath, that's what we're supposed to do when we're given the order. So now we cut to a scene where we see Jude Law. Would you ever picture him as a hitman? I guess we can, right? We've seen him in some, movies where he could be a tough guy. And the scene with him, where they introduce him, is interesting. He is also a photographer. And we cut to a scene where there's a guy dying. He's got a knife in his chest. He's not dead yet. Blood all over him. He's dying. And we see Jude Law taking a photograph of him. He's got the camera, the old-fashioned cameras. He takes the photos. After he gets the contract, he tells Frank Nitti, Stanley Tucci, he says, I'll take $1,600, but whatever photographs I get, they're mine to keep. I guess he sells them afterwards. Maybe that's just a hobby. He wants to keep a scrapbook of all the people he killed. Who knows? We don't find out what that's all about. But anyway, after he takes the photograph, he goes up to the body and holds the knife and puts his hand over the guy's, and he makes sure the guy is dead. So he did his job. Contract killer. Next scene, we see Tom Hanks now. He's going to deliver young Michael to his wife's sister's house. That's where he wants to send him, so he could be safe while Tom Hanks goes and gets his revenge. So on the way there, and again, this is in the Midwest, it's late at night and they stop in a diner. Tom Hanks goes inside. Well, we see Jude Law somehow has found him and sits in a booth not too far away from Hanks. There's a cop sitting down at the counter. So whatever Jude Law was going to do, he's got to wait. He's got to wait at least till the cop leaves. They're talking a little bit. Jude Law's kind of getting ready to finish the deal. He's looking over at the cop. Somehow Tom Hanks feels something. He slips out, gets in his car, and starts to drive away. Jude Law realizes that, goes out, goes after him, starts shooting. Hanks tells his son, get down. He's shooting at the car. The cop comes out, sees what's happening. Jude Law kills the cop. But Tom Hanks gets away. It's a great scene. So now Tom Hanks realizes they know where he's going to take his son. They must know where his sister-in-law lives, so that's out of the question. So now he has to figure out another way to try to get Al Capone and Frank Nitti to understand what Connor did, so they get him to turn against Connor and turn against Rooney. So what do? Hanks says, you know what? To himself, Capone's got money in banks that's illegal money, it's bootlegging money, and they keep it on a side. It's not documented anywhere. It's just kept in the banks. They know where to keep it. So he keeps it in the banks, and obviously he's paying off all the bank managers. So Tom Hanks said he's going to go to all of these banks, and he's going to rob all of Capone's money, and they're going to blame it on Connor. That's his plan. But in order to do that, he's got to teach his young son, Michael, how to drive the getaway car, because Hanks is going into the bank and Michael's going to drive the getaway car when he comes out. So Michael learns how to drive the car. This is a pretty independent kid, does a good job, becomes a getaway driver at 12 years old, whatever the heck he is. And then we see a series of scenes where Tom Hanks actually goes into the banks and he starts to rob. He said, I don't want to rob the people's money. I want all of Al Capone's money. I want it. And he starts taking it from the bank managers. Well, word gets back to Capone and to Nitti. They find out what's going on. Tom Hanks wants Capone and his crew to know that it's him that's robbing the banks. He wants him to know that. And he's putting a lot of pressure on them. You're going to get rid of Connor and Rooney, or I'm going to keep robbing your money. He's doing it purposely, and he's letting them know who's doing it. Okay, so after a while, Capone and his crew, they get wise to what's going on, and they take the money out of the bank so that Tom Hanks can't do this anymore. So now what happens is Hanks has got to think of another way. So he finds out that it's Capone's accountant that took all the money out and that's now handling things and it's got books and records that could really put Capone and Nitti and the whole outfit in trouble. So now Tom Hanks has to find the accountant. He finds him. He's in a hotel someplace in the Midwest. He goes in there to see the accountant in the hotel. Again, another great scene. A lot of great scenes in this movie. At first I thought it was slow, but it's not. There's a lot of action in it. Tom Hanks finds the accountant. The accountant has the books and records allegedly at some point, at some place in that hotel. And he goes in there, he's got him at gunpoint and he's telling him, give me the books and records. So little does Tom Hanks know that Jude Law was notified and he's there also. So he's there to kill Hanks. Great scene. There is a shootout and he injures Jude Law. They get away again, Hanks and his kid. They're gone. And he's got the records now. Okay, but in that shootout, Tom Hanks gets shot pretty bad. So the kid now is driving. Tom Hanks is dying. And they stop at a farmhouse with an elderly couple. The elderly couple is nice. They take Tom Hanks and the kid in, and he stays there for a couple of days, couple of weeks, whatever it might be, and he recovers from the bullet wound. And we see them after a while. They're leaving the farmhouse. What are they going to do next? So I think now Tom Hanks does the only thing that he knows he can do at this point. He goes straight to Rooney, Paul Newman. He meets him in a church and basically says, we got to talk. Great scene. They go downstairs, I think, into the basement of the church, and it's a great dialogue between the two of them. And basically, Tom Hanks wants Paul Newman to kill his son. He says, look, you got to kill him. I mean, he wiped out my whole family. He's a bad seed. I'm summarizing here. He says, you got to kill him. And Rooney says, I can't do that. And then he says something Paul Newman does to Tom Hanks that kind of cut a chord with me, because Tom Hanks tells him, your son's a murderer. Paul Newman looks at him and says, we're all murderers. We all kill. This is the life we lead. We understand that. Honestly, people, that kind of struck a chord with me, hit home with me. I mean, look, I was in that life 20 plus years, and obviously that I've seen a lot. I've done a lot in my life. A lot of people that I once knew, I saw get killed. They're not here anymore. And it's one of the horrors of that life. But when Paul Newman said it, it kind of really sunk in. You know, it sunk in. I'm going to be honest with you. We're all murderers. We kill people. This is what we know. This is what we do. And I'm not saying I kill people. I'm just saying it struck a chord. Let's leave it at that. And then Paul Newman says something very, very telling. He says, one guarantee we all know, none of us are going to heaven. And man, I'm going to tell you this, you know, I actually stopped the movie at that point in time, and I thought about it, and almost got down on my knees and thanked God and said, you know, I am a Christian. I do believe in Scripture. You know, God has proved himself to be very viable to me in many different ways. I'm not going to get into that. I'm not preaching. But I believe with all my heart, you know, in the Christian faith, that no matter what you've done, if you sincerely confess your sins, what's the key word there, people? Sincerely. Because remember, I'm going to tell you this, I was pretty good on the street. I could probably pull the wool over a lot of people's eyes. But I know one thing, I can't pull a scam on God. He knows my heart. He knows all of our hearts. And in our faith, we sincerely believe that if we confess our sins and we accept Jesus Christ as our Savior, because remember, according to our faith, he died on the cross for the forgiveness of all sins. If we firmly believe that and we accept Christ, then we're saved. Our sins are forgiven. And some of us will be in heaven. All of us will be in heaven that sincerely and honestly do that. And some of you can stop me and say, oh, Mike, you're preaching now. Yeah, maybe I am, you know, because there's times when I do talk about my faith. I'm not a preacher. I don't get up, you know, in the pulpit every day. But when I can share my faith, I do it because I'm very blessed to be alive and free and have the ability to do that. And I thank God that that's not correct, what Paul Newman said. He said, one thing we can guarantee, none of us will get to heaven. Well, you know what, Paul Newman? In this, you're wrong. We have a way out. But again, you know, sometimes certain movies and certain lines, they can really get to you. So what happens? Tom Hanks knows Rooney's not going along. The next scene we see, Rooney is leaving. He's going out to his car. He's got a parade of bodyguards around him. He gets to his car. By the way, the old 1930s cars, they were great, you know. I love this whole era. The whole scene was great. And he sees that his driver is dead. And then all of a sudden, he starts to look around. He gets a little bit nervous. And boom, 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 boom. One at a time, all his bodyguards are going down. And then we see Hanks walking. It's raining out. Great scene. He's walking towards Paul Newman. Looks at him. Newman knows it's over. Got the machine gun. Boom, 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 boom. He kills Rooney right then and there. Wiped everybody out. Revenge complete. That's it. Next thing you see, him and Michael, his son, on the beach. He's got it all done now, right? And we see Tom Hanks looking out at his son who's on the beach. He's from a beach house. He's looking out a big window. And all of a sudden, boom, he gets shot. Who was it? Jude Law, the hitman. He's there with a camera, face is all bruised from the injury that he got when Hanks shot him. And he shoots Hanks, and he's about to photograph him. Hanks is hanging on, you know, dying. And then we see little Michael behind Jude Law, ready to kill him. He's got the gun pointed. And Tom Hanks is looking at little Michael and kind of shaking his head, doesn't want him to do it, don't want the kid to be a murderer. And then we hear a shot, and actually it was Hanks who shot Jude Law. He still had a little left in him. He shot him. He didn't want his son to be a murderer. Michael walks over to his father, embraces him. Tom Hanks dies in his arms. Next thing we see is Michael at his aunt's house. They say, you know, what do you say about your father? And all he says is, he's my father. And that's how it ends. So, you know, the moral of the story is, or, you know, the summary of the story is, he got his revenge, but mob life, man. I can tell you this, in my time in that life, I've seen more destruction of families than I've seen families survive by a great margin. I really mean that. It's not a life that's conducive to a good family life. Family suffers one way or the other. The way of the street is no good. You know, people say to me, Michael, why did you get out? That's why. I wanted to preserve my family. And this is a different kind of a movie, you know, Irish mob, whatever, but it's the street life. And ultimately, that's how it ends up for anybody involved. So, again, to you young kids out there, play it straight. No other way to go. Great movie, Road to Perdition. Give it a shot. I know you're gonna love it. That's it for today. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for, I think we're now at 510,000 subscribers, so thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you shortly. And how do I always leave you? Be safe, be healthy, God bless, and I will see you next time.